Ryan stepped out of the sleek black sedan, stretching his legs after the long flight. The tropical breeze was warm, carrying the scent of salt and blooming flowers. The grand entrance of the five-star resort was just as extravagant as Bianca had described. White columns, cascading waterfalls, uniformed staff standing at attention like soldiers in some luxurious kingdom. He was here for her. Not because he enjoyed these high-society vacations, not because he cared for the clinking of champagne glasses and empty laughter of the so-called elite, but because his wife had begged him to come. "Ryan, it'll mean so much to me," she had said a week ago, draping her arms around his shoulders while he sat in his study, going over accounts for the winery. "All my friends are bringing their husbands. I don't want to be the odd one out." That was a lie. He knew it now. She didn't want him there. The moment they arrived, it was clear he wasn't part of her world anymore. They walked into the lobby, where Bianca's group was already gathered, 6 of them, tanned, glittering with gold, draped in designer brands. Bianca fit right in, her long blonde hair cascading over her bare shoulders, a white silk dress clinging to her like it had been custom-made. She was laughing before she even greeted him, caught in some joke with her friend, Jessica, whose fake tan was practically dripping off her skin. Finally, he arrives. One of the men, Daniel, smirked. His father owned a hedge fund, which meant Daniel considered himself a king. He slapped Ryan's shoulder, but it wasn't friendly. "Thought you might have backed out, man. These places aren't cheap, huh?" Ryan said nothing. He had paid for this entire trip. Every room, every meal, every ridiculous spa treatment. They just didn't know it yet. The concierge handed out key cards in small envelopes, calling out names. Jessica Reynolds, Presidential Suite. Daniel Carter, Oceanfront Villa. Rachel and Lucas Shaw, Private Bungalow. Ryan waited. The stack of envelopes was dwindling. Bianca was chatting away, not paying attention. "Bianca Carter, Penthouse Suite," the concierge announced. She stepped forward, smiling, and took her keycard. Then silence. Ryan frowned. "And mine." The concierge glanced down at the tablet, scrolled, and then hesitated. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't have a reservation under your name." Ryan's stomach tightened. He turned to Bianca. She didn't even flinch. She just gave a small, innocent shrug. "Oh, babe," she cooed. "I guess I forgot to book yours." "Forgot?" No, she hadn't forgotten. The group burst into laughter. Jessica snorted. "Oh my God, that's brutal." Daniel smirked, sipping his overpriced cocktail. "Guess we only booked rooms for the important people." Bianca giggled, twirling a loose strand of hair. "I mean, we had to prioritize the elite guests." The words hit like a slap, but Ryan didn't let it show. He didn't let his jaw tighten, didn't let his shoulders stiffen. He just nodded once. Understood. Then, without another word, he turned around and walked straight out the front doors. Ryan didn't rush. He didn't storm out in anger or cause a scene. He simply walked, calm and deliberate, out of the grand lobby and into the humid night air. The distant sound of waves crashing against the shore filled the silence left in his wake. He could still hear their laughter behind him, fading as the heavy doors shut. They thought they had won. They thought they had humiliated him. Bianca thought he would do what he always did, swallow his pride, play along, and tolerate the disrespect for the sake of keeping the peace. Not this time. He pulled out his phone as he strolled through the resort's immaculately manicured garden. He wasn't checking messages or scrolling through social media like Bianca always did. No, he was handling business. A single phone call. That's all it would take. But not yet. Ryan tucked the phone back into his pocket, savoring the moment. He wanted them to marinate in their own arrogance a little longer. He knew exactly what was going to happen. They were up in their penthouse suite now, clinking glasses, probably making more jokes at his expense. Bianca would be basking in their attention, the queen of her social circle. She lived for this. The admiration, the exclusivity, the illusion of importance. And in her mind, Ryan was an outsider. A useful asset when needed, a financial safety net, but not someone worthy of her world. It hadn't always been like this. There was a time when she loved him for who he was, a man who worked with his hands, who built something real. She used to admire his dedication, his quiet strength. But over the years, as her ambitions grew, so did her hunger for status. Slowly, she had started treating their marriage as a business deal rather than a partnership. And tonight was her biggest mistake. Ryan reached the resort's open-air bar, a sleek, modern structure overlooking the beach. The bartender, a young guy with a relaxed smile, looked up. "Drink?" he asked. Ryan nodded. "Whiskey." "Neat." He sat down at the bar, pulling out his phone again. No surprise, Bianca hadn't even texted him. She had assumed he'd either find his own way or come crawling back, willing to accept whatever scraps of dignity she threw his way. The whiskey arrived. He took a slow sip, letting the burn settle in his chest. Then, finally, he made the call. "Mr. Carter," a voice answered smoothly. "Everything in place?" "Do it," Ryan said, his voice calm. "Understood, sir. We'll process the cancellation immediately." A slow smirk formed on Ryan's lips as he placed the phone down. Up in the penthouse, Bianca and her friends were celebrating. They had no idea what was coming. The night air was warm, thick with the scent of salt and jasmine from the resort's manicured gardens. Ryan took another slow sip of his whiskey, savoring the moment. He had spent years being patient, accommodating, letting Bianca have her way because he thought love meant compromise. But tonight was a lesson. He glanced at his phone. No messages. No missed calls. She really thought she had him wrapped around her finger. Thought he was too mild-mannered, too forgiving to ever push back. He checked the time. It wouldn't be long now. Up in the penthouse, Bianca was undoubtedly still basking in her moment, twirling her glass of champagne, drinking in the laughter of her so-called elite friends. She had played the game for years, moving up the social ladder, convincing herself that she belonged among the rich, the powerful, the exclusive. And tonight, she had made a grand show of proving that Ryan, her own husband, was beneath her. Ryan chuckled to himself. She was about to learn something. In the penthouse, Bianca lounged on the plush sofa, legs crossed, eyes half-lidded with satisfaction. Jessica was sprawled beside her, their shoes kicked off, their glasses filled to the brim. The group was reveling in their own cleverness, still giggling at Ryan's stunned reaction when he realized he had no room. "He just walked out," Jessica snorted. "Didn't even argue. Just left. Like a kicked puppy." Bianca smirked. "He's probably sulking somewhere, trying to book a last-minute room in some cheap motel. I mean, what did he expect? This place is for the best of the best." Daniel leaned back in the leather chair, sipping his scotch. "Hey, at least he took it well. Some guys would have caused a scene." Bianca rolled her eyes. "Please. Ryan's too predictable. He'll cool off, come crawling back, and I'll make up some excuse." She gave an exaggerated sigh. "Maybe I'll tell him I had no choice, that the resort was overbooked. He's such a softie, he'll probably even apologize for being difficult." Jessica grinned. "And in the meantime, we get to enjoy the penthouse without him dragging down the vibe." They all laughed, the sound echoing off the glass walls. And then the phone rang. Bianca groaned, grabbing her phone off the coffee table. "Ugh, I swear, if that's him, Al." It wasn't. It was the resort's front desk. She frowned and answered. "Hello, Mrs. Carter?" The concierge's voice was polite but firm. "We need to speak with you regarding your reservation." Bianca's stomach did a little flip. What about it?" There was a pause. Then, "I'm afraid we'll need you to vacate the penthouse immediately." Silence. Bianca blinked. "Excuse me. Your reservation has been canceled, ma'am. Effective immediately." Bianca shot upright. "What the hell are you talking about? I booked this weeks ago." The concierge hesitated. "Actually, ma'am, your husband booked it, and he has just terminated all reservations under his name." Bianca's blood ran cold. Her friends stared at her, their laughter dying as they saw the look on her face. "What's wrong?" Jessica asked, sitting up. Bianca's mouth opened, but no words came out. Then, a sharp knock on the door. "Hotel security," a deep voice called from the hallway. "Please gather your belongings immediately." Bianca shot up from the couch, her heart hammering. Jessica and Daniel exchanged confused glances, while Rachel and Lucas sat frozen, their drinks halfway to their lips. The knock came again, louder this time. "Hotel security, ma'am." "Open the door." Bianca's throat went dry. This had to be a mistake. A joke. Ryan he couldn't, do this. He wasn't the type. Except, he was. Panic clawed at her chest as she grabbed her phone, scrolling through her messages. Nothing from him. Not a single call, not a single text. "Bianca," Jessica hissed, eyes wide. What the hell is going on? Bianca ignored her and pressed redial on her phone. Ryan's name flashed across the screen. The call rang once, twice, then voicemail. Her stomach twisted. The knock turned into a pound. "Ma'am, this is your final notice. If you don't comply, we will enter and escort you out." Daniel stood, running a hand through his slick back hair. All right, calm down. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding." He strode toward the door, straightening his designer shirt like his mere presence would fix everything. He opened it with a smirk. "Gentlemen, I think." Two uniformed security guards stepped forward, their faces unreadable. Behind them, a sharply dressed hotel manager held a tablet in one hand and an earpiece in the other. "Mr. Carter has canceled all reservations under his name," the manager repeated in a cool, professional tone. "That includes the penthouse, the private bungalows, and the oceanfront villas." Jessica gasped. "Wait, what?" Lucas shot to his feet. "Are you saying all our rooms are gone?" The manager barely spared him a glance. "Yes, sir. Effective immediately. Your personal belongings are being packed and will be sent to the lobby." Bianca's nails dug into her palm. "You can't do this," she snapped, stepping forward. "This is our reservation. I paid for this." The manager didn't even blink. "Actually, ma'am, Mr. Carter paid for this. And per our policy, the primary guest has full control over all bookings under their account." Jessica cursed under her breath. "Oh my God." Bianca felt her face go hot, her entire body trembling. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. "Listen," Daniel started, flashing his best, wealthy elite smile. "We're VIP guests here. I'm sure we can work something out, Al." "The penthouse is already reserved for another party," the manager cut him off. "And unless you have a separate booking under your name, we'll have to ask you to leave the property." Lucas scoffed. "This is ridiculous. You can't just kick us out." "Sir," the guard's tone hardened, "if you refuse to comply, we will be forced to involve the authorities." Bianca felt the room spin. Her perfect trip. Her perfect moment. She had planned this down to the last detail. Ryan wasn't supposed to react like this. He was supposed to sulk, to accept his place, to wait for her to come around. Instead, he had just destroyed her. Her friends were looking at her now, staring, their expression shifting from shock to anger. "You said you booked this," Rachel whispered. "Yeah," Lucas muttered, crossing his arms. "You made it sound like this was your idea." Jessica just shook her head. "This is humiliating." Bianca felt her stomach drop. She spun toward the hotel manager, forcing a smile. "I will call my husband and sort this out," she said sweetly, trying to ignore the way her hands were shaking. "Just give us a minute." The manager remained impassive. "You may do so from the lobby, ma'am. Please gather your things." Bianca opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The security guard stepped aside, motioning to the door. The message was clear. She had no power here. She had nothing. And somewhere, wherever he was, Ryan was watching this all unfold and letting it happen. Bianca's breath came in short, sharp bursts as the reality of the situation crashed down on her. The walls of the lavish penthouse, once a symbol of her superiority, now felt suffocating. She turned to her so-called friends, expecting support, but all she saw was growing resentment. Jessica crossed her arms, narrowing her eyes. "You told us this was your trip, that you had the connections." Rachel scoffed, grabbing her designer bag. "So the husband you just humiliated is actually the one who paid for everything?" Bianca clenched her fists. I can fix this. Just give me a second." She turned away from them, trying Ryan again. Straight to voicemail. Damn him. She stormed to the minibar and grabbed her purse, her fingers fumbling as she pulled out her personal credit card. There was no way she was getting thrown out like this. She'd book another suite. Hell, she'd book the entire damn floor if she had to. No one humiliated her. She stalked toward the hotel manager, shoving the card at him. "Run it. I'll book another penthouse." The manager didn't even blink as he took the card, swiped it against his tablet, then frowned. Bianca's stomach tightened. He swiped again, and then he handed it back. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your card has been declined." The words hit like a slap. "What?" Bianca snapped, snatching it back. "That's impossible." The manager remained calm. "Would you like to try another card?" Bianca's hands trembled as she pulled out a second card and shoved it toward him. He ran it. Same result. Declined. A cold sweat formed on her back. She had spent months living off the joint account, making large purchases without consulting Ryan. He never said anything, never objected, until now. A terrifying thought settled in. Did he cut her off? She scrambled for her phone, her fingers slipping against the screen as she opened her banking app. Her personal account, drained. The joint account, gone. Her name was removed. Bianca's vision blurred as her breath came in quick, panicked gasps. He had done it. That bastard had done it. "Ma'am," the manager's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. "If you are unable to provide payment, we will need you to vacate the suite immediately." Jessica exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "Unbelievable. You dragged us into this mess." Lucas and Rachel exchanged glances before grabbing their things. "We'll find our own way out," Rachel muttered, brushing past Bianca without another word. Daniel, who had been silent up until now, gave Bianca a long, hard look. "You really thought you could play him, huh?" He let out a humorless chuckle. "Guess you weren't as elite as you thought." Bianca turned on him, rage bubbling to the surface. "Oh, shut up, Daniel. You're only here because of your daddy's money." He smirked, unfazed. "And yet, I still have a place to sleep tonight." Her vision darkened with fury as she watched them all turn their backs on her. The very people she had prioritized over her husband. The people she had used to boost her social status. They weren't her friends. They never were. A sharp knock at the door snapped her attention back to reality. "Ma'am," the security guard said, stepping in now, "it's time to go." Bianca swallowed hard, her pride shriveling to dust. With shaking hands, she grabbed her purse, the only thing she had left, and walked toward the door. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew one thing. Ryan was not going to get away with this. Bianca stormed out of the penthouse, her heels clicking furiously against the marble floors as she made her way to the elevator. The security guards followed a few steps behind, making it painfully clear that she was no longer welcome. Her heart pounded. Her mind raced. Ryan had done this. The man she had dismissed. The man she had humiliated in front of her friends. The man she thought would always stay in line had just turned her world upside down in a matter of minutes. The elevator doors slid open, revealing the empty lobby. It was past midnight now, and the once bustling check-in area was nearly deserted, except for one person. Ryan. He sat alone at the sleek, dimly lit bar, a glass of deep red wine swirling lazily in his hand. His posture was relaxed, completely at ease, like a man who had just closed the most satisfying deal of his life. Bianca's blood boiled. She marched toward him, ignoring the eyes of the front desk staff and the few late-night guests lingering nearby. Her pulse hammered in her throat as she came to a stop beside him. He didn't look at her, didn't even acknowledge her presence. She slammed her clutch onto the bar. "You think this is funny?" Ryan took another slow sip of his wine before finally setting the glass down. Only then did he turn to face her. His expression was unreadable, his eyes cool and collected. "I don't think anything about this is funny," he said calmly. Bianca's hands curled into fists. "Oh, cut the act, Ryan. You knew exactly what you were doing. Canceling my reservation? Freezing my accounts? Publicly humiliating me?" Her voice rose with each accusation, but Ryan remained infuriatingly unfazed. He leaned back in his chair. "I didn't humiliate you, Bianca. You did that all on your own." Her breath hitched. A few nearby guests turned their heads, pretending not to eavesdrop. The bartender wiped down a glass, clearly invested in the unfolding drama. Bianca's nails dug into her palms. "You think you're punishing me?" she hissed. "You think freezing my cards and throwing me out of my hotel is some kind of power move?" She let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "I made you, Ryan. Without me, you're just a guy selling overpriced wine to snobbed tourists." Ryan tilted his head slightly, studying her like she was some kind of rare, fascinating creature. Then, with an almost amused smile, he said, "That's where you're wrong, Bianca." She stiffened. "I built everything I have long before you came along," he continued, his voice calm, measured. "You enjoyed the lifestyle, sure. Played the role of the doting wife when it benefited you. But I made this life. And now, I'm taking it back." A cold shiver ran through Bianca's spine. For the first time, she realized something terrifying. Ryan wasn't angry. He wasn't yelling or throwing accusations. He was done. And that was worse. "You're making a mistake," she forced out, keeping her voice low. "You and I both know you're not the kind of man who wants to be alone." She leaned in slightly, lowering her tone to something more seductive. "You still love me." Ryan gave her a slow, knowing smile. "I love the idea of you." He drained the rest of his wine and set the glass down with a soft clink. "Turns out, the real you wasn't worth it." Bianca's chest constricted. "Ryan." He stood up, slipping a few crisp bills onto the bar to pay for his drink. Then, without another glance, he turned and walked away. Panic surged in Bianca's throat. This was spiraling too fast. She had expected him to be upset, had expected payback, but she hadn't expected this. He wasn't just punishing her. He was erasing her. And for the first time in years, Bianca was truly afraid of losing him. Bianca stood frozen in place, her mind scrambling for control. This wasn't supposed to happen. Ryan was supposed to be humiliated, groveling, desperate to be included in her world. Instead, he had flipped the entire game on her without even raising his voice. She spun on her heel, rushing after him. "Ryan." He didn't stop, didn't slow down. She practically had to jog in her designer heels to keep up with his long, steady strides as he made his way through the resort's grand entrance and into the night. The valet hurried to open the door for him, but Bianca darted forward, grabbing his wrist before he could step inside the sleek, black luxury car waiting for him. "Ryan, stop," she hissed, her nails digging into his skin. "We need to talk." For the first time, a flicker of irritation crossed his face. He slowly turned his head toward her, his sharp blue eyes locking onto hers. "Talk," he repeated, his voice even, but laced with something dangerous. "Now you want to talk?" Bianca swallowed, trying to regain control. "You're being ridiculous. You think pulling a stunt like this is going to fix anything?" Ryan exhaled through his nose, as if she were exhausting him. "Fix anything?" "No, Bianca. I don't want to fix anything. That's the difference between you and me. You still think this is a game. That if you twist things just right, I'll come running back like an obedient little husband." Her jaw clenched. "I never said that." His lips curled into a humorless smirk. "You didn't have to." Bianca's pulse raced. People were watching. The valet, the bellboys, a few guests stepping out for the night. She hated looking desperate, but she couldn't let him leave. Not like this. She inhaled sharply, changing her approach. "Ryan, you're mad. I get it, okay? Maybe I went too far with the joke earlier, but canceling all of our rooms? Freezing my cards? You embarrassed me." Ryan's eyes flickered with something dark. He took a step closer, his presence suddenly overwhelming. "You embarrassed yourself," he said coldly. "You wanted to put me in my place tonight. And now you're upset that I reminded you whose money actually runs your little fantasy life." Bianca opened her mouth, but no words came out. Because he was right. And the way he looked at her, the complete absence of affection in his eyes, made her stomach twist. She softened her tone, reaching for him again. "Ryan, please." But he took a step back, out of her reach. "You know what the worst part of all this is?" He tilted his head slightly, studying her like she was a stranger. "I don't even care anymore." Her heart dropped to her stomach. Ryan gave her one last look, then nodded at the valet. The man quickly shut the car door behind him, and within seconds, the vehicle pulled away, leaving Bianca standing in the middle of the grand entrance, utterly alone. For the first time in her life, she felt the weight of what she had done. And for the first time ever, she had no plan to fix it. Bianca stood there, motionless, as the taillights of Ryan's car disappeared down the long, winding driveway of the resort. The humid night air clung to her skin, but all she felt was the icy grip of panic. This wasn't how the night was supposed to end. She had controlled Ryan for years. He had always been the predictable one, the steady, dependable husband who tolerated her social climbing, who let her indulge in her elite fantasies without question. But now, he had walked away from her without hesitation. No argument, no begging, no second chances. And that terrified her. She turned sharply toward the valet, who was still standing there awkwardly, pretending not to have witnessed the entire thing. "Give me a car," she snapped. "Now." The young man hesitated. Ma'am, where would you like to go?" Bianca's jaw clenched. She didn't know. She had nowhere to go. Her penthouse was gone. Her credit cards were useless. Her friends, if she could even call them that, were probably already scrambling to secure their own accommodations, none of them willing to take on the burden of helping her. The realization sent a wave of nausea through her. Ryan had cut her off, completely, and for the first time in years, she wasn't just inconvenienced. She was powerless. Her hands shook as she yanked out her phone, her fingers fumbling against the screen as she tried calling him again. Straight to voicemail. Her breath hitched. She dialed again, and again. Nothing. A hollow, desperate feeling clawed at her chest. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was the one who decided when things were over. Not Ryan. She had to find him. Had to fix this. She sucked in a deep breath, forcing herself to think. Where would he go? The answer came almost instantly. The vineyard. It was his sanctuary, his real home. He always went there when he needed to clear his head. Bianca straightened, adjusting her dress and composing herself. She still had one last move to play. She would go to him. She would make him see reason. Because no matter what he thought, he needed her. He just didn't realize it yet. The drive to the vineyard was long, winding, and dark. Bianca sat in the back of the hired car, staring out at the empty countryside as the realization of how much power she had just lost gnawed at her. She had never been here alone before. Every time she visited the vineyard, it was with Ryan, playing the part of the polished, sophisticated wife of a successful businessman. She had treated this place like a weekend escape, a background for Instagram photos, a location to entertain the right kind of people. But to Ryan, this place was everything. It was his family's legacy, his hard work, his pride. Bianca had never cared about that before. But tonight, she had no choice. She clenched her jaw as the driver pulled up to the entrance. The wrought iron gates were already open, as if welcoming Ryan back to the only home that ever truly mattered to him. Her stomach twisted. She had underestimated him. For years, she had treated Ryan like an accessory to her success, a patient, reliable man who would always be there, no matter how much she pushed him aside. He wasn't supposed to be capable of this. Yet here she was. No credit cards. No hotel suite. No sycophantic friends to back her up. Just her. Alone. The driver cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we're here." Bianca swallowed and forced herself to straighten. "Wait here." She stepped out of the car, her heels clicking against the gravel driveway. The main house loomed ahead, the warm glow of the porch light illuminating the front steps. Beyond it, the rolling vineyard stretched into the night, rows upon rows of grapevines swaying gently in the breeze. She took a steadying breath and marched toward the house. Ryan was inside, and she was going to make him listen. Bianca didn't knock. She pushed open the door and stepped inside like she still belonged there. The moment she did, she heard music. Soft, slow, a bluesy tune drifting from the old record player in the corner of the room. The scent of oak and aged wine filled the air. And there he was. Ryan sat at the wooden dining table, a glass of his finest red in hand, a half-full bottle beside him. He didn't even look surprised to see her. He didn't even look up. He just swirled the wine in his glass, watching the deep red liquid move as if he had all the time in the world. Bianca's pulse quickened. Ryan. He took a sip. Then, finally, his gaze lifted to meet hers. There was no anger, no frustration, just exhaustion. You have some nerve, he said calmly. Her breath hitched. He had never spoken to her like this before. Not cold, not distant, just done. She swallowed hard. We need to talk. Ryan exhaled through his nose and set his glass down. No, Bianca. You need to talk. I don't need anything from you anymore. Her stomach dropped. She hadn't come here to beg. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't sure she had any other choice. Bianca's throat tightened, but she forced herself to step further inside, closing the door behind her. The soft glow of the old chandelier cast shadows across the wooden beams of the ceiling, making the room feel smaller, more suffocating. She had never noticed how quiet this place was, how different it was from the loud, flashy world she had surrounded herself with. She had never really belonged here. But that didn't matter. She needed Ryan to listen. You're making a mistake, she said, her voice controlled, measured. She wouldn't show weakness. She couldn't. Ryan leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. A mistake. He shook his head slightly, as if the word itself amused him. Tell me, Bianca, was it a mistake when you let your friends laugh at me tonight? Was it a mistake when you booked yourself a penthouse and acted like I wasn't even supposed to be there? His eyes locked onto hers, sharp and unwavering. Or was it only a mistake because you lost? Bianca's fingers curled into her palm. That's not fair. Ryan let out a dry chuckle, rubbing a hand over his jaw. Fair. His gaze darkened. You wouldn't know fair if it slapped you across the face. Bianca's nails dug into her skin. She had to redirect this. Had to. You overreacted, Ryan. Canceling my cards? Freezing our accounts. She threw up her hands. I get it. You were upset, but you went too far. He studied her for a long moment. Then, in a slow, deliberate motion, he picked up his wine glass, took a sip, and set it back down. You still don't get it, do you? His voice was eerily calm. This isn't about being upset, Bianca. This isn't about punishing you. Her breath caught. This is about you not being my problem anymore. The room went silent. A cold, sick feeling spread through her chest. That was the one thing she hadn't been prepared for. Not anger, not yelling, but indifference. I built a life for us, she tried, forcing her voice to stay steady. A good life. You wouldn't be where you are without me, Ryan. Something flashed in his eyes, just for a second. Then, he shook his head, like he almost pitied her. You really believe that, don't you? He leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. You think you were the prize in this marriage. That I was lucky to have you. Bianca swallowed, trying to hold his gaze. But the truth. Ryan's voice lowered, his words cutting deep. You were dead weight. She flinched. I worked. I built something real. And while I did, you drained me, financially, emotionally. You treated me like I was beneath you. His jaw clenched. But you forgot something, Bianca. He stood, slow and controlled, his presence towering over her. I was the one holding you up. Bianca's pulse pounded in her ears. You don't mean that. He exhaled, shaking his head. I do. Her throat tightened. This wasn't how this conversation was supposed to go. She was supposed to fix this. Twist things. Make him need her again. But Ryan was already walking away. Already done. She took a shaky step forward. Ryan, wait. He stopped at the doorway, but didn't turn around. You need to leave, Bianca. The words hit her harder than any insult ever could. Her vision blurred. What? He turned slightly, his expression unreadable. We're done. Panic clawed at her chest. No. She had lost control before. Had lost arguments. Had lost patience. But she had never lost Ryan. She took another desperate step forward. Ryan, please. His gaze locked onto hers, steady and final. Go. Her breath hitched. And for the first time in her life, Bianca knew she had truly lost. Bianca stood frozen, her entire world crumbling beneath her feet. Ryan's eyes held no warmth, no hesitation, just quiet certainty. He wasn't threatening her. He wasn't trying to hurt her. He was just done. She had always assumed that Ryan would never leave. That no matter how much she pushed, no matter how much she took, he would always stay. Because that's who he was. The patient husband. The dependable one. The fool. But now, staring into his unwavering gaze, she realized the truth. Ryan had never been weak. He had just been waiting. Waiting for the moment he finally saw her for what she really was. And now, that moment had arrived. Bianca's pulse pounded in her ears. Her mouth opened, but no words came. She had nothing left to say. Nothing left to bargain with. Nothing left at all. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Then, with a final glance, Ryan turned and walked away. Bianca's breath caught. She wanted to scream, to chase after him, to undo everything. But she couldn't move, because deep down, she knew. There was nothing left to undo. She had pushed him too far. And now, she had to live with it. Her hands trembled as she grabbed her purse, her nails digging into the leather. She forced herself to straighten, to lift her chin, to pretend she wasn't breaking apart inside. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out of the house. The cold night air hit her like a slap, but she kept moving, one foot in front of the other. She didn't know where she was going, didn't know what came next. All she knew was that for the first time in her life, she was truly, completely alone.